All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sharin Stories. I'm your host, Peaks, with my two beautiful co-hosts, Sarah States and the real St. Paul. This is not a therapy session. You will not find mental health professionals here, nor are we a substitute for said people. We are just regular people sharing our stories with mental health. Though today, that regular person is exchanged for an extraordinary one. Revered by her family as a strong, well-rounded woman with an overflowing heart. On top of that, she was the captain of the cheerleading squad, a nationally recognized competitive dancer, winning titles in the field, and a killer younger sister to a good friend of mine. She is now back in school looking to someday make her way into the mental health profession, all while trying her hands in different philanthropic projects. The introduction could go on forever, I know it, but it would be better from her. So everyone, please welcome Carly Sperrazza.
Ooh,
Thank you so much. That was an awesome intro.
Of course, Carly. I tried my best, and I definitely didn't get most of it from Chelsea. So Carly, before you start and go into your story, just kind of give yourself your introduction, a minute or so.
Absolutely. So as Keith nicely introduced me, I am Carly. I'm 21 years old. I'm from Buffalo, New York, born and raised. Go Bills. And I'm here today to share my journey with mental health and hopefully be able to impact someone watching. So I'm really excited.
I can guarantee you will. And without anything else from the crowd, let's just jump right into it then, Carly.
Awesome. Sounds good. So I'm going to start my story where like my mental health episode kind of began. But through the story, I'll kind of incorporate background with like my childhood and kind of going backwards in time, just because it does obviously have some impact on it. But to begin, it was October 2019, which not too long ago. I was going to school at Kent State University, which is in Ohio, kind of by Cleveland area. Great school. I absolutely loved it my first 2 years. I was very involved on campus. I was in a sorority. I made a really great group of friends who I still talk to and am close with today. And just had overall a really great time there. If you could understand, like nothing went wrong those first 2 years. It was very smooth sailing, a quick transition. But coming into my junior year, which was fall of 2019, things were a little bit different. And by different, I mean, I kind of lost the sorority aspect of college, which I don't really need to get into. It's not super important to the story, but that was one reason why I kind of had some disconnect to the university going back for that fall semester. So that was a little aspect, not the whole aspect of feeling that way, but I just felt different when I went back for that fall semester. It just wasn't the same feeling of Kent State that I had for the past 2 years. And I couldn't really fully understand why. I definitely blamed a part of it on not being a part of a sorority anymore, but I know that that wasn't really it. There was something deeper that was going on with me that I didn't really experience before. So going into the fall semester, I noticed changes kind of just with my everyday life. Like I wasn't doing the things that I loved as much anymore. I slowly started to feel myself become less social. And for those who know me could understand, I am like a social butterfly. Usually I love to talk to people. I love to go to parties. I love to, do everything social. Like that's my thing. So it was really weird when I started to feel like I didn't even want to do those types of things. So I remember in October, we had a fall break. So it was like a long weekend. Everyone went home for the weekend. And I remember thinking to myself, maybe going home will be like a nice little refresher to just get out of this funk that I'm in and start back fresh for the rest of the semester. And going home did definitely help in a way. But it also kind of made me feel like I was missing home in a sense, because I was there and I was like, I almost feel like more comfortable here, more safe when I'm feeling this way. Like I just kind of wanted to be at home and stay at home. And that was different for me because usually I was like, get me out of this house. Like the second I graduated, I was like, I'm going to college. Like I'm not living at home anymore. So that, again, it was a different feeling. It was just all these new feelings coming on to me. So then I remember it was the day I was supposed to drive back to Kent. And I actually broke down to my mom. And now that is something I never did. I mean, I would do it if I was really, really, really upset, but I didn't like her to see me weak or to see me upset because I'm an empath. I would worry about what she would think and how she would feel. And I'd put myself in her shoes as a mother. And I was thinking, oh my God, if that was my daughter, like I'd be so upset seeing her like that. So like my whole life, I was always just like to myself about feelings and kind of just brushed them off and was like, I'm fine. Like, get back up. You're okay. So for me to break down to her was kind of a big deal. But it wasn't really, I don't think I fully expressed to her what was really going on because I didn't even know at the time. I kind of put it on, I'm stressed, like school is getting more serious. I'm a junior. I have to find an internship. And it wasn't as much like an emotional, like what I'm feeling internally. It was just kind of like, oh, I'm stressed, whatever. So she gave me great advice, as she always does. And I went back to school that Sunday. But I still kind of had that feeling inside that just something wasn't right. I felt very like uneasy, and it was really confusing because I wasn't understanding why I was feeling that way. So that whole week after I came home from fall break, it was kind of like a progressive thing. Like day by day, it just kind of started to get worse in different areas of my life. So for example, like my schoolwork, I was starting to fall behind there, and that's something I never did. I was always very on top of that. And there was like some big projects I was doing, and I had just completely blew them off and like would not even ask for help from my professor. So that was just like totally out of the norm for me. So then it kind of, like I said, it kept progressing that week. I started to just shut down, like slowly shutting down. I was going out like to social events, and I could socialize, but it just felt like I was really, really forcing it. So I eventually did like almost completely shut down. And by shut down, I mean like I wasn't even talking to my closest friends, to my boyfriend at the time, to my family or not at the time, but to my family. And I just kind of felt like numb almost. Like I didn't even, it was just so overwhelming that I was just like, nothing's there. So it took, it was that next Sunday, like a week from when I came back, and my mom called me because I was supposed to be doing a job interview, just like a part-time job interview. And she was calling to see how that went. And I told her I didn't go. And then that was it, like talking wise, I just kind of stopped. And my mom obviously was very, very concerned. Because if anyone knows me, it's her. And she was like, what's going on? Like, did something happen? Like, are you in trouble? Like, thinking obviously worst case scenario, I'm not speaking. I'm totally like this different person that no one recognizes. So she was obviously very concerned, and I couldn't really give her much. Like, there was nothing that I could even like wrap my head around to like tell her why I'm like this. So she was like, I'm coming there right now. And Kent State is 3.5, 4 hours from Buffalo. So that's not just like a quick drive. And that's my mother. Like if you need her, she's there in a half a second, which I love her. But yeah, so she's like, I'm coming there right now. Like you do not seem okay. And I'm worried. So I'm like, okay, still not like talking to anyone. My roommates are in the room with me, just trying to like get anything out of me to like get somewhere. And there was nothing. So once she finally got there, we sat down with no one else. And she's like, listen, Carly, like you can tell me anything. Like if something seriously bad happened, like that's okay. Like you can tell me, you need to talk about it. So I would say like yes and no to like things that she would ask, because like she was mostly worried that, you know, I was harmed or something along those lines. So we kind of ruled that out a little bit, but we were still not really getting anywhere. So she ended up staying the night with me, and the next day she got me set up with the on-campus counseling. And honestly, that didn't help at all. I'll just say it. I don't know if it was because at that time, that's not what I needed, talk therapy. That was not what was going to get me anywhere, because I wouldn't talk. So that didn't really help. And I remember my mom asking me, she was like, well, you know, how do you want the rest of the semester to play out? Like, it was smack dab in the middle of the semester. So she was like, maybe you could go to your classes during the week and come home every weekend, or maybe we could get your professors to do something virtual so that you can finish from home. And she was kind of just giving me options. She made it clear. She was like, don't feel like you're stuck. Like, you're never stuck. Like, you can always make a change. And that stuck with me, even just through other parts of life, her saying that. But yet again, I still was like so uneasy. And so I was like, yeah, we could do those, but I don't know. It just, nothing feels okay right now. So we were emailing my professors, kind of getting them in the loop, saying I was going through a mental crisis and needed to spend some time with my family, blah, blah, blah. And she was honestly getting ready to head home. And then she looked at me and she was like, would it make you sick to sit here one more second, like to stay in Kent? I was like, yes, like I need to go. So she's like, all right, grab a bag, like get some stuff. And I literally walked out of there with a bag of a few things, left my car, left all my other stuff, and we just went to Buffalo. I couldn't say any goodbyes. Like, I was not even thinking about that. I was just so focused on like getting out of there. So that was really like abrupt. I kind of just left out of nowhere for my poor friends at the time. They were obviously really worried. But it was what I needed to do. I needed to go elsewhere and get right. So that whole car ride, I remember very vividly, like my mom telling me, like, you don't have to talk, like just listen to the music and just try to like calm yourself down. And so that's pretty much what happened for 3.5, 4 hours. And when we got home, I got to see like my dad and my sisters, tried talking to them, same thing, like really didn't get anywhere. It was kind of just me listening to them talk, which was good because they always have a lot of good advice, especially there is a lot of mental health history in my family, so they get it. But I still wasn't opening up to anybody. Even my sister, who she probably knows every single detail about me, I couldn't even sit in a room with her alone and talk. So that was just like really scary for me, because I wanted to like talk and share, but I just felt like I couldn't. So then the next morning, my mom wanted to take me to my OBGYN just to kind of rule anything in that category out, because that could very well have been an issue. Maybe that's why I wouldn't talk, whatever. So I agreed to go there, even though I knew nothing happened. It would just make me feel maybe a little bit better to make sure everything there is okay. So it was. Everything came back fine. There was no issues there. But my OBGYN, who I have a very good relationship with, who I've known for years, she said to my mom, she was like, this isn't the Carly that I know. Like, I really think you should take her to ECMC and get evaluated. So my mom, obviously trusting her and knowing that she knows me as well, was like, okay, like, I think you're right. We've talked about it after the fact. Like, that was a very hard decision for my mom, just because, you know, going to ECMC, that's like the next step into hospitalization and all that kind of stuff. So that was definitely difficult, but she knew that that's what I might have needed at the time. So my sister Chelsea knows a nurse who works in the on the psych floor at ECMC. So she kind of like let her know what was going on, and she recommended to go through the help center, which is like a small clinic. It's a part of ECMC, and they have counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, everything there. So that's what we did. We went there, and I remember like on the car ride there thinking like, wow, like this is kind of getting serious. Like I'm about to go to ECMC. And in my mind, before this experience, I just knew ECMC as they have a psych floor, and I'm picturing in the movies what a psych floor is. Like that's really scary. So like I said, it still wasn't talking, but I was definitely starting to feel a little nervous now. So we went to the help center, and everyone there was so great. Like for especially with me not really giving anyone anything, they were so patient, and so like they didn't rush us. They didn't make me feel like I had to talk. They were very, very patient with us, which we appreciated. But since I was over 18, my mom couldn't sign for me, and I wouldn't sign like the papers to, even get seen there. So that was a whole battle in itself, just trying to get me to sign the paper. And I was just in that confused fog mindset where it's like, I didn't know why I was there. I didn't know what was going to happen to me there. I didn't know, I just was confused and afraid. So eventually, I think I eventually signed the papers. And I think they brought us up to the next floor, which was like an evaluation. Like they did all the blood pressure and all that. They did a CAT scan of my brain. And my family was able to be with me that whole time, thank God, because that was really scary. I'm never really in a hospital. I've never been hospitalized before this. So that was like terrifying. But to have them there was everything to me. So eventually, after all the physical tests, they brought me up to this place called CPEP, which CPEP is basically like, I guess you could describe it as like a holding area. And it's like the process of waiting to get evaluated by a psychiatrist and a therapist to therefore get you a bed like upstairs on the floors. And that was scary. That was really like the movies, I have to say, just because it's a bunch of patients just kind of waiting, and there's not beds for everyone there, so there's just kind of like chairs, and you're just sitting and waiting. So I remember just being absolutely terrified, like didn't say a word, not that I was saying words anyways, but just like observing and like looking around and just being like, where am I and what am I doing here? So that was really something else, something I'll remember forever. But it took quite some time to get seen, to have an evaluation, and to further then, get placed on a floor and have a room. And talking to my mom after the fact, she told me that it was supposed to be a 52-hour wait, being in that room. So thankfully, she was in the waiting room with my family, and this doctor saw her like distraught when she found out that it was going to be that long, because they couldn't see me while I was in there. So he came over to her and was like, is there something I can help you with? Like, what's going on? And she explained that to him. And he was like, what's her name? Like, I'm going to go speed up this process for you. So he was our saving grace, seriously. And finally, they were able to get me a room on one of the floors. I think it was like ages like 20 to 27 or something like that, like in my age range. And I had my own room. And that was relieving for me, at least that I was out of that CPEP area. But at the same time, this was like something that was going to be somewhat permanent, not for that long, but I didn't know how long I would be there. So that was definitely like a scary thought, that like, how long am I going to be stuck in this place? And still wondering, why am I even here? So it took a while for me to trust the staff on the floor. Just because, they were taking my vitals and eventually giving me meds that I refused to take because I didn't know what they were. I was scared of them. That was really hard for me to like adjust. I wasn't eating the food they were giving me because I just was so unsure of it all. It was very like scary for me. So eventually it took some time, but I started to get a little more comfortable with the staff, which they were all really awesome, and just taking the medication that they gave me. And my saving grace on the floor was that they had two visiting hours, or not two visiting hours, two visiting sessions, one in the afternoon and one in the night every single day. And my family was there from the second they'd let them in the door, and they were the last ones that left every single time. Like it was, if that was not a thing, I don't know what I would have done. They were always bringing me the best kind of food ever. And just obviously doing whatever they could. It was a very, very scary situation for all of us. So yeah, I was there for 2 weeks. And while I was there, they came up with the diagnosis of major depressive disorder. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like that made sense to us at the time. So I was discharged with that diagnosis, and they gave me an antidepressant to be on. And I was finally discharged, which was really exciting, but also scary again, because I was going back into the real world and kind of facing reality. And also, I left this out, but while I was in the hospital, my parents, with my consent, of course, did withdraw me from Kent for the semester. So that was something that they did to make me feel a little bit better about, recovering. Like you don't have to jump right back into school, or even go back there. And that was kind of left up to me as to whether I wanted to go back eventually or just kind of call it quits completely. So when I was discharged, that was definitely just like the beginning of recovery. I did learn a lot in the hospital through groups and therapists and, all of that, just the importance of self-care and really taking care of myself. Because like I mentioned before, I'm very empathetic, and while it is a blessing sometimes, it's also a curse, because I always, whether it was friendships, relationships, family, always focused on other people and making them happy and doing what they want to do. And I completely neglected myself. And I think that's a big reason why I finally just kind of like exploded in this little shutdown that I had, because I was constantly like suppressing all my emotions and everything that I needed to deal with. And I just kept pushing it down. Then finally, like it all just came out and I didn't even know what was going on. So that was a big thing that I needed to start to work on, was understanding self-care. So once I got out, I would say I did get set up with an outpatient program through ECMC, through the help center. And I was seeing a therapist and psychiatrist through there, who I still see right now. And I think I had an appointment like a couple days after I was released. So I was really just like getting into it right away. And things were going okay. It was pretty smooth sailing for the most part. I was taking the medication, doing things with my family, easing back into reality. And then I would say probably 3 weeks. It was the week of Thanksgiving, actually. So yeah, it was about 3 weeks from my discharge date. I started to experience mania. So we didn't know that it was mania yet at the time, but I started to kind of get in this like confused mindset. Like the first thing that happened that was weird was I was going out with friends like that Thursday. And then the Wednesday night, like I came downstairs dressed and ready to go, but it was not till the next day. So I was like, wait a second. Like my family was like, we kind of laughed it off, like, oh, you got your days mixed up. But like, it was just so weird because I was like ready to go. Like, I totally thought that that was what I was doing. So we kind of brushed that off. And then, like I said with the other episode, like it progressively started to get worse. Like the next day, I started to hallucinate. So, like, while I think it was in the middle of the night, like I would start seeing things that weren't there, or I would, think something was happening that wasn't. So I was completely in this state of mind of like, and I thought nothing was wrong. Like I was, my family describes it to me as like I was mad at them when they told me I'm not going out. It's the next night. Like I was like, what do you mean? Like I'm going out. Like it's tonight. And they're like, okay, like no, you're not. But it was just a lot of that, like me completely having this idea in my mind that was not right, and the hallucinations, some paranoia, all kinds of stuff like that. So eventually, during that time period of the hallucinations and everything, I wasn't sleeping for like nights in a row. So, I mean, you guys know when you don't sleep, like your mind starts to really get messed up. And I was already messed up at that point. So it was just like the perfect storm. And also at that time, my mom was kind of going through a difficult time just because, like I said earlier, she deals with anxiety, depression her whole life. And it was kind of an aftermath of me being in the hospital. She was kind of like coming off of that, and just it was a lot, and she was just experiencing anxiety herself. So at the same time of me being manic, my mom is struggling. So it was just like our house was a disaster. So I give my dad and my two sisters a lot of credit during that time period, because I don't know how they managed to support both of us at the same time. But anyways, as it got worse, they obviously called my psychiatrist and kind of explained what was going on. So we went in, I think the next morning, and she let us know that the antidepressant that I was on, Zoloft, was actually, it caused me to go manic. So, I mean, it's crazy because like I know people that have been on that same drug, but just the way that my body processed it, it caused me to like swing completely the other way and be manic. So, she was asking me questions, which I like kind of remember that, but kind of don't. It's kind of like a fuzzy memory. But after talking to my family about it, like she basically asked me like, do you feel like you're on top of the world right now? And I was like, yeah. And like, that's literally what I was feeling like, which is crazy to think about. But I was so like high on that, so high on the end of that spectrum versus what I was experiencing before when I was so low and like shut down. So that was definitely something that we've never experienced before. And it was obviously very scary when you're hallucinating and thinking things that aren't real. So she was able to prescribe me a different medication that kind of brings you down from the mania, thank God. And then I think I slept like 18 hours straight after that because my brain was so like overworked from being manic that it caused me to sleep for that long. So that really worked. Fortunately, it brought me right out of the mania. And after that, I was like pretty steady. Once I got that medication and we kind of like figured out exactly what my body, reacted well to and what it didn't, that was kind of what helped me like keep moving forward. So then after that little episode was over, I had another doctor's appointment with the psychiatrist to kind of see how things were going. And she was like, well, we kind of rethought your diagnosis. And I was like, oh boy. And she was like, we think this is bipolar disorder. And that like didn't sit well with me at first. I was like, no, like, I don't think that's me. Like, I don't think I have that. Like, I don't have these crazy mood swings. Like, cause I totally had this like different idea of bipolar disorder. And I'm sure a lot of people do before they, understand what it really is. And I just I did not like that idea. I fought it a little bit. I was like, are you sure? Like asking the doctor that clearly knows what they're talking about. But eventually she explained it really well to me. And she was like, it's not necessarily these mood swings up, down, but it's the ability for your brain to like be fine and then go to one extreme super quickly, whether it's high or low. And people experience bipolar disorder very differently. It depends on your case and your body. But as she kind of like explained it to me, and it made sense. It made a lot more sense to me because then I looked back on my life and I was like, okay, there was probably times where I was manic, maybe without the hallucinations, but just like really, really happy and like go, go, go. And then there was times where I felt that low shutdown feeling. So, I mean, it was definitely something that I didn't want to accept. But looking back into my life and understanding like, yeah, that kind of does make sense. And I started to become okay with it. I think a big thing for me was I was always like, out of my family, I have two older sisters, like I said, and I'm the baby. So I watched them go through everything. I watched them through the good and the bad. And I was always like taking notes, like, okay, don't do this, do that. So I kind of always like was fine growing up. And I never really had any like issues. So, that goes along with me not talking about my feelings because I was kind of like held to the standard that I was like the kid that like had it going on and like didn't have any, problems. And that wasn't set by them. It was kind of in my own head. So to think now that I'm diagnosed with this mental illness, at first it was like, so now I have something and this is what I am. But I quickly kind of just learned to kind of accept it and be proud of who I am with or without mental illness. And just try to focus on everything that I have been able to do with this in my life. And it's only a part of me. It's not who I am. But yeah, I think that realization was really, really hard for me. And I think a lot of people deal with that, or maybe they think they could have a mental illness, but they won't get help because they're scared to have a diagnosis and scared to have a title. So I think that's like a huge problem. And that was kind of what I faced too. But yeah, ever since I have been really good, really steady, stable. I'm not going to say that I haven't had my bad days or days that I really have to remind myself, of all the healthy practices that I've learned. But overall, I've really just been chugging along and taking everything that I experienced and making it something that I can use going forward. And I look back on it and I don't wish it happened any other way, because it definitely like made me who I am and where I am today, and something that I am so passionate about that I want to pursue a career in potentially in the future. So I would never like regret anything that happened or wish it didn't happen, because it, as traumatizing and scary as it was, it really did make my life that much better. So yeah, that's pretty much the story. I'd love to answer any questions that you guys have.
Oh, well, we have some questions. I know that. I would like to start. I feel like I could say this every episode, but moms are fucking amazing. Um, the amount of times they are literally the changing factor in these stories is unbelievable. But I just like from where you're at right now, the ability to come on here and share the story with anybody. I mean, not the crazy amount of listeners, but there is going to be people here, and anybody can hear it. To where you were when you were not speaking to your mom, your boyfriend, any of your friends. Can you pinpoint like major changes on the reason you're at this point now, or is it mainly just because of understanding and time?
Honestly, I'd say a little bit of both. I think I definitely over the past year and a couple months or however long it's been have grown up a lot, and I think that did play a factor in just maturity and kind of understanding life more. But also, I think that I really learned how to kind of like express my feelings and talk about them and feel comfortable about that instead of completely piling in all my emotions to the point where, like I said, it explodes. So I think my understanding of opening up to people that I trust and kind of letting things out more has really made me able to kind of grow and kind of be where I am today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is like amazing because it just made me think so much about a previous guest we had on because I had no idea, like what you were saying about um, bipolar disorder. Like I had this like convoluted idea of what bipolar was when we first started this podcast, and it wasn't until we had a conversation with a colleague of mine rising from bipolar. That's her Instagram name. Her name's Glenda. On it, that I really began to understand that it's so much more than just like what we see in the media. And so it's just like hearing you also sort of say all these things is just so eye-opening. But I want to talk about your experience with therapy because you mentioned in school how talk therapy like at that time just didn't work for you. And I'm just so curious because it seems like after that experience and then like having the experience in the hospital and then talking to like psychiatrists and sort of like moving forward, how your vision and like idea of therapy has sort of evolved or changed, and if it's something you're finding helpful now in the stage where you are right now after having one diagnosis and then going back and having this new diagnosis. Like, is it a trusting relationship, and is it something that like you just feel like the timing is right now where you're at, and is it something that you're going to continue with?
Yeah, definitely. I think when I was back at school with the on-campus counseling, um, I just like I don't know if it wasn't because I didn't really trust anyone at that point. So I really couldn't just trust this random therapist that they assigned me to. So, I mean, I think it was a mix of me not contributing enough for her to help me. Because I feel like in therapy, it's a two-way street. Like they're going to help you as much as they can with what you give them. And that's something I really noticed now with my therapy now is the more I can say and talk about, like the more they can give their input on. And I love it now. Like I seriously look forward to it. And I plan on going to therapy as long as I can, because even if you don't have a mental illness, I think every single person could benefit from even just talk therapy. So yeah, I really think that I changed my perspective on that just on my end, being more open to actually giving them something to help me with rather than me just expecting something from them after me not doing anything.
And what, like, when you were going into the kind of like the mental institute, what advice can you give people to when they are going in there? Like, what advice can you give them to prepare themselves to mentally to while they're about to go in there? Is there any advice you can give them?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because I always look back on that and I'm like, I wish someone could have given me advice on that. But I didn't even like have time to mentally prepare to go there. Like I was just in the car going there. And I didn't even have time to process it. So I'm thinking back to if I did have, time to kind of think about, okay, here's where I'm going. Like I'm about to be there for maybe some time. I would definitely say my biggest piece of advice is to just be open and let people help you. Because that's what they're there for. That's why you're there. You know what I mean? Is to get help. And I think a lot of people, even I, with myself, and I noticed the other patients on my floor were so closed off to all of the therapists and social workers and all of the people trying to help you just because they were either scared, which that was my case, or they just didn't want to. So I think being open and actually wanting to accept the help would be the best bet for advice there.
That's great advice. Yeah, I can imagine though, when you're in that situation, not really like it might happen too fast to like sort of like obtain advice from others. But I'm reading this book right now called Burnout, and it's about the stress cycle and the stress release cycle, and how like when I don't usually read books like this because I get really bored, but I'm in a book club. It was like a New Year's thing. I'm reading this book. But it's like how over the years, like your body and your mind like accumulates so much stress, especially as women, like just from, just the things that we have to deal with on a daily basis, even like cat calls and things like that. Like all of that adds on stress like inside of you that you like just kind of like when someone like does that to you, you just push it to the back of your mind. You don't really like act on it or like go and punch someone in the face or something like that. So like all these things sort of just like add up in your body, and it can lead to like health complications or like breakdowns or like acting out or like shutdowns and different things like that, because you're not like actually closing a stress cycle. You're just like leaving it open and like just accumulating more and more gunk. And I mean, you obviously have a diagnosis, and that's partly chemical. But I feel like what you're describing at first, and that feeling of like your first breakdown to mom, like there had to be accumulated stress within you that sort of like brought you to this point. And I'm wondering, like, is this something that you've recognized within yourself, and like something that you're able to like find coping mechanisms for right now, aside from like your psychiatrist and your medications and various things like that? Like, are there other things that sort of you're actively practicing or doing within yourself to like sort of like handle all the different stressors that we face on a daily basis that might exacerbate whatever you're dealing with?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's something is one of those things that I work on every day. It's just like within me. I like talk to myself and I'm like, okay, this is stressing me out. Like, let me acknowledge it instead of just like throw it out the window and keep moving forward, because that's what I used to do. And I always had that forward mindset. Like I wanted to like keep going, keep accomplishing things. So like I wouldn't let anything like come in my way. But now I think I like to like slow myself down and slow that thought process down and say, okay, I'm feeling this because of this. Like I'm acknowledging it. I'm speaking it into existence. Like it's there. And then whether I need to deal with it or I don't need to deal with it, that's something I can decide. But yeah, instead of just kind of brushing it under the rug and keep going, because that clearly doesn't work.
Yeah, I feel like that's like the first step, and that takes like so much self-awareness to be able to be like, oh yeah, that's a stressor. Like, let me process this before I just like compartmentalize it. And then, like that's like so, I don't know. I wish I could be that self-aware sometimes.
Well, Carly, so we don't have a lot of time left. I do want to kind of throw one last question. You are the youngest person who's ever been on this podcast, so I think it might just be a good thing to ask you. So number one, when you were at school, were your friends and stuff noticing? Obviously, you weren't talking to a lot of them, but were they noticing in general that like your entire mood would shift, and then in overall, because I still wouldn't talk to my friends about my mental health. I talked to you guys or whoever's like willing to listen outside of my friends. Do you see like a shift in younger generations having these conversations amongst each other, or is that still a little bit farther from where we're at?
Honestly, unfortunately, I still feel like it is a little far. I don't want it to be. I would love for it to be more normal to discuss these things. And I just think it's crazy that like a physical illness is like so okay to talk about. Like if, you broke your leg or something, but talking about a mental illness is so like weird, especially in my generation. Like it's so strange. So I think like I definitely try with my close friends to be more open about it. And even with not my friends, like I'm on this podcast. Like I'm not really afraid to talk about this experience with anyone who wants to hear about it. And that was another really big fear of mine coming out of the hospital. It was like, what am I going to tell people? Like I just left Kent State and now I'm back in Buffalo. Like they're going to wonder, they're going to ask. And it was like, every conversation I had was never negative. It was either I connected with someone who was also struggling or had a similar experience, or they were just so glad that I was okay. So I think those conversations can really be beneficial, and people don't realize that because they're just so afraid to kind of be honest about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carly, for coming on at all.
Thank you for having me.
This is about the time where we would ask you to plug. We ask you to plug anything you're currently doing. If there's an Instagram you want people to find you at, or something that you've written, just let us know and shoot that out right now.
Should I put it in the chat?
Oh no, you say it. Say whatever you want people to know about yourself.
Okay, my Instagram is just my first and last name. Do you need me to spell it?
No, we'll put that out for everybody.
Oh,
it's just a chance to let people know what you're doing.
Okay, I think like you guys wanted it, or you actually wanted me. Okay, whatever. So should I say it?
Yeah,
say it.
Okay, so my Instagram is Carly Sperrazza. Should I spell it?
That's perfect. No, that's fantastic. You've done a great job with that, Carly. If anybody asks, we will absolutely point them in the 100% correct direction. We just like to give you the chance to, in case you're working on any projects or anything, or doing anything on that social media, if you want people to check it out, we want you to let people know. And then we also do the same and let them know to like, follow, subscribe, doing whatever we're doing. And that will be it for today. Thank you so much, Carly. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.